Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic. It's time for another Top 5 video. The last Top 5 I did was my favorite science fiction books of all time. That was not Dune. After that, I wanted to do another one involving books. Also, I wanted it to be a Top 5 list that I hadn't really seen yet, so I think I may have come up with something. Now, I love my heavy-themed, deep-thinking books like Dune and 2001: A Space Odyssey that deal with some heavy subjects and really makes you think as a reader. However, though, it is nice just to get into a story that is there just for some pure escapism and is just fun. That is what the books on this list is for me. Fun memories with lots of nostalgia for these stories. Some of them are not the deepest or even the best written, while some may transcend what they were meant to be, but are fun all the same. The origin of this top 5 list came about as a result of my top 5 science fiction book list. On that list, I wanted to only include books that were science fiction books first, so anything that spun from them, like games, comics, or movies, could link their origins back to that book, which is the opposite of Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars is primarily a movie franchise, with all the games, books, and toys being spun off from it. Same goes for Star Trek, which is primarily a television franchise. However, the books spun off from these sources do offer some very good science fiction reads, and I wanted to do a list of them somehow. The second problem, though, is I haven't read enough of them to justify doing a top 5 Star Wars or Star Trek book list. So this is a combo list of books based on various entertainment franchises. With that introduction out of the way, let's get into this list. Top 5 books based on a film, TV, or game. Number 5. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Lean, Green, and On the Screen. The novelization of the film written by B.B. Hiller, published in April of 1990, with 16 photos from the hit motion picture. It might not seem like much in the day and age of the internet. Those 16 photos were a big deal back then. New York is being swept by a massive crime wave of theft that the police can't deal with, and reporter April O'Neil is trying to solve. Until one night she is about to be robbed herself, when the lights go out and she is saved by some mysterious guardian. The attackers are all taken out and wrapped up, ready to be delivered to the police. The only clue left behind is a dagger with 3 points. As she picks up the clue, she sees a green face with a red mask quickly disappear down a manhole. This event brings her together with the city's mystery crime fighters, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They join forces to stop the crime gang who is recruiting the city's youth and is led by none other than Shredder. Like most kids, during the 80s and early 90s, I was a big fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys and the cartoon. When I heard of the news that they were doing a live-action film, I couldn't wait to see it. I was so impatient, in fact, that when I spotted this book at the local mall, I bought it immediately, then went straight home and read it cover to cover before I saw the film and loved it. Then a week or so later, I went to the theater and watched the film, after having completely spoiled the story for myself reading the book. Why is it even on my list? Considering how simplistically it is written and coming in at a whopping 92 pages, well, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was a film I was excited to see and had a blast going to see it with my friends in 1990. However, it is a film that for me personally hasn't aged well since I originally saw it in 1990. I've only gone back to watch it less than a handful of times over the years since. Unlike the other films that came out around the same time, like Batman '89 and Terminator 2. However, my most fondest memories is how much fun I had reading the book. I just couldn't put it down. It was a total page-turner for me at the time. Also, because I hadn't seen the film yet when I read the book, my imagination made the turtles look much more realistic than what they would eventually turn out to be on film. I still have this book on my shelf right to this day. It's gotten a bit tattered over the years, having survived several moves. I have never read it since I was a kid, but every so often I'll pull it off my shelf, look at the cover, and flip through it looking at the 16 black and white photos inside. Then I'm brought right back to my childhood and how much fun I had as a 12-year-old reading this book. It gives me a very powerful sense of nostalgia. The film, on the other hand, just doesn't have that effect. When I watch it, I just think of how badly it has aged. Number 4. Resident Evil: The Umbrella Conspiracy, the novelization of the first Resident Evil game, written by S.D. Perry and published in October of 1998. The residents of Raccoon City are gripped with fear when several grisly murders are discovered in the surrounding forest. Strange reports start to come in about how the attacks were done by vicious unknown creatures, and even some humans. This all seems to be happening near a secluded and remote mansion that belongs to the Umbrella Corporation. Sent to investigate the mansion and the strange murders is the paramilitary unit known as STARS, Special Tactics and Rescue Squad. Highly trained operatives that are ready for anything. Or so they think, for they can scarcely imagine the horrors that await them at the Umbrella Mansion. I was never a massive gamer. However, every now and then I'd come across a game or game series that would really hook me in. In the late 90s, one of those series would be the Resident Evil games, with Resident Evil 2 being the first game in the series that I played, after seeing its trailer on TV. Then I went on to play Part 3, and after that I found a copy of the first game and played through that one as well, all the way through until the disappointing Resident Evil 5. I have fond memories playing through these games, with my favorites in the series being Part 2 and Part 4. I've even enjoyed watching the terrible films loosely based on the games. That is some of my background with the game. I didn't know there were any Resident Evil novels. I had only been aware of some comic adaptations, until not quite 10 years ago when I was in a local used bookstore and came across this book. The artwork on the cover really grabbed me, and so I was intrigued enough to buy it. I have to admit, I was skeptical of this book being any good, since it was an adaptation of a video game storyline. However, when I read it, I was really surprised. Author S.D. Perry did an incredible job adapting the storyline of the first game into a novel. It really captured the feel and spirit of the game, 1,000 times better than any film adaptation that is out there. It really brought back all the fun feelings I had playing the games. Not only is it an extremely well done adaptation of the game's storyline, it's just a well written, entertaining book, and a good horror novel in general. After enjoying this first one so much, I've gone on to read the other 2 entries in the book series and plan to read more. Number 3. Aliens vs. Predator: Prey, written by Steve Perry and Stephanie Perry, published May 1994. Mashiko Nagoshi accepted the assignment of supervising the ranching colony on Ryushi as the next challenge in her career. However, it would turn out to be more of a challenge than she could ever suspect, when she would have to defend the colony with her very life. For little do the human colonists realize that this planet is being used as a hunting ground for the predators, with the hunted being the deadly aliens with their black outer shells and acid for blood. Sometimes the hunter ends up being the hunted, with the human colony caught in the middle, desperately fighting to survive. As a kid, I was a huge fan of these 2 alien monsters. I've watched the original Predator film countless times, and same goes for the first and second Alien films. As far as designs go, their looks are top tier and timeless. During the mid-1990s, just after what would have been the second most impactful move of my childhood, when my parents decided to pack up and buy a place in a very small and very uneventful Canadian prairie town. Me, being only 16 and still under their control, had no choice but to move with them. It was a very strange point in my life, where I was in this very boring, isolated period of time. One particular day, I was out with my parents, as they went to the next town, which was a 20-minute drive up the highway to buy groceries, since the town we lived in had nothing for stores except one small mom-and-pop shop with limited supplies. While I waited for my parents, I checked out the small selection of books that they sold at the grocery store. Most drugstores and grocery stores have these sections where they sell paperbacks and magazines. As I looked over the titles of the usual authors you always find in these places, like Danielle Steele, James Patterson, and John Grisham, this cover jumped out at me like a flare. I pulled the book down and read the back. I was hooked, and I had to read it. I had been aware that Dark Horse had done a crossover in the comics. This was the novel adaptation of that famous comics crossover. The story sucked me right in, and I was fascinated by how the lore of the Predator was expanded upon in this book, giving readers a wider glimpse into how their culture worked. Then we get this all-out brawl between the aliens and the Predators. We would finally get the story brought to the big screen a decade later. The 2004 film did borrow many elements from this story. However, they threw in a lot of stupid stuff that ruined the story. They already had the perfect blueprint. I don't know why they just didn't follow it. Now, this book is actually the first part in a series of books, with the next one called Aliens vs. Predator War. I've only ever read this first one, but I did recently pick up War at a used bookstore, so it might be time for a reread. Number 2. Star Wars: The Bounty Hunter Wars, originally published as The Mandalorian Armor, June 1998. Slave Ship, October 1998. Hard Merchandise, July 1999. The first Sci-Fi Book Club edition, July 1999. Written by K.W. Jeter. Taking place during the events of Return of the Jedi, The Bounty Hunter Wars tells the story of how Boba Fett survives his fall into the Sarlacc pit, then goes on to face his most deadly challenge yet, when he comes across evidence implicating Prince Xizor in the murder of Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle. Is Prince Xizor the one really behind the deaths of Luke's aunt and uncle, or is it a grand deception by a secret and more deadly foe? Boba Fett must make his way through the deadly underworld to solve the mystery, with a woman who has no memory but may hold the key to it all, or to Fett's own doom. Now, this book was originally published as 3 books. However, as I've done in the past, I'm going to take some personal liberties here and count it as 1, since the version I have is the Sci-Fi Book Club edition, and it's 1 book. Picture it, December 1999. It's very close to Christmas. And not only is the year coming quickly to an end, but a decade as well. I was at home and very sick with a lung infection that took me off my feet for 2 solid weeks. This downtime allowed me to do 2 things: read Star Wars: The Bounty Hunter Wars and quit smoking. I had just joined the Sci-Fi Book Club a couple of months prior, and Star Wars: The Bounty Hunter Wars was one of my initial new member sign-up picks. Also, it was 8 months after seeing Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in theaters. This book was only my second dip into the Star Wars expanded universe, with my first dip being the comic book miniseries Tales of the Jedi, Dark Lords of the Sith by Dark Horse. With Episode 1 still fresh in my mind and Episode 2 on the way, with rumors of Boba Fett somehow being involved in the story of Episode 2, my interest in Star Wars was at a high, from when it was pretty much gone during the late 80s and early 90s. I got my hands on this book at the perfect time. The one idea from Star Wars that I always felt was very interesting was the underworld of the bounty hunters, which was embodied by the mysterious character who appeared in Empire Strikes Back, and then is quickly and seemingly killed off in Return of the Jedi. As a kid, I found Boba Fett a very fascinating character because he was mysterious and he looked cool, with a really unique-looking, cool ship. George Lucas has said, had he had known how popular the character would be, he would have never killed him off in Jedi. Well, he was popular, and fans wanted more, and they got it with this book. The book does a really good job of expanding on the underworld of Star Wars. It really paints Star Wars as a Western in space. It also does a good job of expanding upon the character of Boba Fett without destroying the mystery. It finds a good balance with that. It It's a fun, action-packed read with a good mystery that pulls you right through. This was the first Star Wars novel I ever read. I've read a few over the years since then, but this one has always been my favorite, the one I feel a lot of nostalgia for. If you get the chance, track this one down. Number 1. Star Trek Federation, published November 1994, written by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. The USS Enterprise, under the command of Captain James T. Kirk, is on a mission to rescue legendary scientist and inventor of warp drive, Zefram Cochrane, from captors that want to use his knowledge to create a deadly weapon, after having last encountered him on the planetoid in the Gamma Canaris system and keeping his existence a secret from Starfleet. Then, 99 years into the future, the USS Enterprise D, under the command of Jean-Luc Picard, must also rescue an important and mysterious person whose safety is vital to the Federation, while also receiving what appears to be a Borg artifact. It is a mystery that will span space, time, and connect two starships. It's an odd thing when it comes to myself being a Star Trek fan, but Star Trek Federation is the only Star Trek book I've ever read. Most of my exposure to what is sometimes called beta canon in Trek circles has mostly been through comic books. I got this book for Christmas from my older sister, who is a casual Star Trek fan and Star Wars fan. How my sister decided on this particular book, I have no idea. However, when I opened the pages and started reading, it didn't take long before I was hooked and couldn't stop. This book is by far one of the best books I've ever read of this type. It's also one of my favorite Star Trek stories ever told, even outranking some of the stories on screen. I read this book shortly after seeing Star Trek Generations in theaters, which was one of the most disappointing films I had ever seen. This book got so much closer to the crossover between the ships and crews that I wanted in the film. What I loved about this book was the story hook, which was you had 3 stories going on in different time periods. One is of Zefram Cochrane during his time, as he is being chased by a crazy political extremist named Adric Thorson, who is convinced Zefram's warp drive technology holds the secret to an ultimate weapon called a warp bomb. Then we have Kirk's story, as he must return to the planetoid where he left Zefram Cochrane on, after learning he had been captured. He also has some explaining to do to Starfleet as well, like why he kept the existence of Zefram Cochrane a secret. Then we have Picard's story, where the Enterprise D encounters a mysterious Borg artifact and goes on a rescue mission of their own. So you have 3 very interesting and exciting mystery stories that, as you read along, start to converge, and how they will finally converge is a mystery unto itself. Also, the thing about this book is that neither Kirk or Picard are the main characters of the story. It's about Zefram Cochrane. He is the main character of this book. It's his story. And the way he views the world of Star Trek is very unique, as he is discovering all this incredible tech for the first time, which we, the viewers, have long taken for granted. So you really get a view of the world of Star Trek with really fresh eyes. This is something the writers have done a great job of accomplishing. This book also deals with a topic that Star Trek really has never dealt with on screen much. That is what the political fallout was when warp drive was invented. We know it united humanity like never before. That is the backbone of Trek lore, but we never got to see the other side of that coin. What about those who feared this new tech, or the ones who didn't have peace on their minds? This book explores some of the darker sides of this political fallout. This book has a lot of great stuff in it, and it is a very good science fiction book along with being a good Star Trek book. After I read it, I gave it to my older brother to read, who is also a fan of Star Trek. He loved the book as well. I also gave it to a friend of mine a few years later to read. He had by that time read quite a few Star Trek books. After reading this one, it became his favorite as well. I'm not the only Trek fan who holds this book in high regard. If you search best Star Trek books of all time online, many websites will have this book on their list of must-reads. So if you're a Star Trek fan and you read Star Trek books, you have to give this one a try if you haven't already. It's an epic space adventure that is steeped in Star Trek lore, and that's why it's number 1 on this list. And that's my Top 5 books based on a film, TV, or game. I had a lot of fun putting this list together, and I'd like to know what your picks would be. So that's everything I have to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.